Okay, so it's been a little over a month since I set up the Into the Woods 20-gallon aquarium, and I want to give you an update on some of the trials and tribulations that I've gone through getting this to where it is now, as well as a few other updates and a couple of little things going on with the channel. It's all coming right up right after this. Hey YouTube, this is Pecktec. I'd like to start off with a big thank you to IFG, the Inquisitive Fish Guy, for sending me this cool Hat Nation shirt. Thanks very much, man. I really appreciate it. Okay, so before we jump into the 20-gallon tank, I want to tell you about some other stuff I've got going on, mainly the big tank. I placed an order a few weeks ago for the big tank. Unfortunately, I think the stand is custom made and they're made in Florida. That was right before Hurricane Irma came through. So there may be a little bit of a delay on the stand. A lot of Florida didn't get hit as bad as we thought they might, and thank goodness for that. I know I, for one, was watching DeLand really carefully, hoping that Solid Gold didn't get smashed too bad by that thing. And also Sarasota, my family's favorite vacation spot ever. Anyway, I decided to go with a 220-gallon tank, and I know that that's not as big as a lot of people have said, oh, you should go 300, 500, you know, it doesn't matter. Fact is, financially, it was just not reasonable. And in the size area that I had to work with, 220 is just fine. Quite often I'll visit the big tank in the back of the aquarium, and when they told me about the size of that, I decided that that's what I wanted. But I've got the tank on the way. I'm trying to decide if I'm going to make my own sump, or if I want to buy a sump, or start hitting up companies to see if they'll send me one. Or maybe even a big canister filter, or a couple of canister filters. It is a drilled tank, so I've got a lot more options than I usually do. So I'd be interested to know what you guys would like to see. I mean, I won't necessarily make my decision off that, but I would be curious to see if you want to see me make a sump, or should I just buy one? I don't know what's more practical there. My thinking was, I've got the 55, I bought $1 per gallon 55, and I have it in the garage and it's sort of holding my fish when I moved out. So I was thinking when I moved the fish out, I could potentially use that as a sump. Still not sure though, it'd be a lot easier to just buy one. Of course, they are kind of expensive too. I tell you what's really going to kill me on this thing are the lights. I am determined to do a planted tank, no matter how big it is. So 220 gallon, fine, but the lights that I'm going to need to make that go are going to be expensive. I could easily spend as much on the lights as I do on the tank itself. I think I've pretty much decided to do some Kessels. I've ordered the Kessel 160 WE. I'll probably need 3 or maybe 4 of them. Supposedly they go out to 24 inches. I might spread it out. Like, I thought about doing really heavily planted on one side and the other side being a lot more open, so I would need maybe less light on that side. The good news is if they don't work out, I could always switch it up on my 55 over here or one of the other tanks. Pretty much any tank could use one of those. But they are a premium product, so what I might have to do is start with like 2 or 3 and kind of work my way up to the other ones. I also thought about building my own lights. I've done a lot of stuff with Rapid LED and building my own lights for a big tank like that, but I'm not sure. I think it actually would be more expensive to do that. Supposedly the King of DIY has got some really cool, cheap, new LED lights that look pretty nice and have a lot of high-tech controls and stuff, but so far I haven't seen how to buy them, so that's kind of out of the question right now. Joey, call me! Where do you get that stuff? But I'm really excited. Really excited to try some new species. My first thought was, oh man, I could put just tons of little fish in there, but this is really my big opportunity to move up. I mean, I've done lots and lots of small tanks. You know, this is even sort of a medium-sized tank for me. And I have one fish in particular that I've always wanted. I've wanted one of these fish for so long. It's a biker, bisher, a poly. In fact, I found a baby one and I wanted to make sure that I had him, so I went ahead and picked him up. Now granted, he's only about 4.5, 5 inches long right now, but he will grow fast. I'm anticipating that tank was going to be here like literally any day now, like within a week or 2 weeks. So I should have plenty of time to get that thing set up before this guy has a problem. He's living in my Edge 12 gallon right now. It doesn't seem unhappy in there. He seems okay, as long as I feed him some food, who comes out and he eats. He's a really cool fish though. I was really excited to get him, and I'm already looking to get more. Most of the videos I see of these guys, they have tons of them living together, and they sort of dog pile up on each other. Apparently they're really, really social fish. So I'm really looking forward to learning more and more about how these guys are. I've been doing lots of reading and research, well before I bought this one. And I would normally never, ever advise you buy a fish before you have the aquarium to put them in. But then a lot of times I don't take my own advice either. I'm just kind of a hypocrite that way. But in this case, I mean, the money's down, the tank's on the way. It'd be just a matter of time. There are a couple of other things that I need to address, like I want to do a background for it. I'm looking at like maybe universal rocks or oh, I love the backgrounds that Joey's using in his gallery right now. I love those things. Even thought about making one. I probably won't make one myself. But I think that would be a really neat way to make it a really nice gallery piece. And I love some of those rocky ridges and things like that. The background that Joey has that I really, really like is the one with the logs, the trees. I think they call it like forest or something like that. I think it's the one he ended up putting in the discus tank with all the other trees, which looks a lot like that, doesn't it? But I'm not looking to do another forest thing, but I really love that kind of those logs in the background, and I think it would look neat with those primitive fish since they have that kind of tubular shape anyway. My other big challenge is I want to find some manzanita wood, kind of like what I've used in the 55 gallon. I want to find some big pieces of manzanita wood. So I'm hoping maybe I can pick up some when I go to the event in Chicago. I know a few people that are going that probably can help me with that. I'm ready to throw down some cash and get some really cool decorations. It's gonna be an amazing aquarium, I hope. But that'll be the aquarium I work on probably from November through January, just to kind of get it all set up, and we'll go through all the different things and maybe have a new place to shoot once in a while. Of course, I've got the convention coming up in early November. I'm going to be in Chicago at the Aquatic Experience along with like a billion other YouTubers. It's kind of depressing because when I went before, there was hardly anybody like really covering. I mean, they do a video here and there, but I mean, I made a ton of videos. I work hard at those things. I shoot a lot, and I'm always running, shooting, run, shoot, run, shoot. But now we've got just a ton of people there. So there's going to be a lot of coverage. I don't know if I'll work as hard as I did before. I'm not even sure people will talk to me. I think everybody in there is going to be interviewed at least 3 times. But there's going to be so many aquarium YouTubers all in one place. Surely I can think of some huge collaboration kind of thing that would be really fun to see. And I've got a couple of ideas for that I'm not going to tell you now. Okay, so now that I've rambled on for quite a long time, let's shift our focus back over here to the Into the Woods tank. That's what I've named it, just because it looks like woods. Most of the tanks I've set up are really, really simple. I've been trying to kind of step my game up a little bit, try to push myself to just try completely new things, do things in a way that I haven't done before, and sometimes I get some results that I didn't quite expect. Although you should expect, if you're doing things differently, not to expect. Anyway, so normally I don't do injected CO2 or anything like that. I have used substrate similar to the soil-based substrate. I've used that before, but I never used this particular one. This one also has the corner filter, which I've never used before, but I thought would be really neat. I made my own spray bar. Really, there's not much about this tank that I've actually tried before. Even the trees and stuff that I set up, although I made one before, I made these almost completely differently from the way that they're attached to the bottom, to the moss that I included on the branches. All in all, this has been a completely different type of project than I've ever worked on before. So normally when I start a new tank, I started off really slow. I put a smattering of plants in. I put a lot of plants in, but maybe not, I don't fill up the tank, because the new growth that comes out of those plants is going to be so much better adapted to that particular situation, aquarium situation. And a lot of times the growth that was there when I put it in will die or fall apart or just kind of look ratty for a little while. So really what you want is the new growth. So you could pack it wall to wall with new plants and it'll look better for that first couple of weeks. But you're also going to end up with a bunch of dead stuff too. So if it decides to melt away or just look ratty and stuff and start to die off as the new growth comes in, it's not going to end up looking much better. It's really a much better deal to put in quite a few plants, but enough room for them to grow and really start to propagate. The new growth is what you want. But normally I plant a tank like this and I don't have CO2 going. Usually the light's not quite as bright as this one is. This light's pretty amazing. It's the Pecktec Planet Plus. I have the exact same light on my 56 gallon. I replaced this old compact fluorescent light that I've had forever, and it is now growing plants in a way that hasn't been growing in there in a long time. So this thing's bright enough to grow plants in my 56 gallon, and here I have it on a 20 gallon. Another weird thing is the selection of plants that I used in here. Almost none of these need CO2. These are all plants that are generally considered to be kind of low light plants that don't need CO2, like really easy plants. But I'm going to go ahead and add light and CO2 to just like supercharge their growth. At least that was the plan. Of course, me being sort of a noob with the canister CO2s and stuff, set it up to about 1 bubble per second. And then I was like, okay, I've got it. And I didn't go back and check for several days. Thing is, the pressure has to take time to equalize and stuff. And that 1 bubble per second quickly turned into and before I knew it, I was walking by the tank and I looked in there. It was algae town. This entire, every tree, every branch was covered in this crazy algae. Now this was a stuff that I'd never seen before too. Like I expected that brown diatom algae, you know, that kind of covers everything. Usually when you first start a planted tank up, you'll see that this kind of brown diatom algae. This stuff usually is pretty much temporary and it's really easy to fix. You can buy one Odo and he will run through that tank and eat it all up. But instead I got some kind of weird hybrid between that brown diatom algae and like a hair algae. It was just this, like a glob of snot. I mean, I swear it was like somebody sneezed algae all over the top of these trees. And I was really depressed. H20 Plants sent me an amazing array of mosses and stuff that go on each of these branches. I mean, I've got several different kinds of moss on here. I even documented, I made a little note in my notebook so I could kind of keep track of which moss is which on through here. So I was pretty bummed out when all that happened, and I started to clean it and stuff, but it was coming back really quick. I immediately cut off the CO2. I added a little CO2 indicator in there, which I didn't put in the first day for some reason. It went from yellow, which is too much CO2, to green, and stayed green for 3 days after I cut the CO2 off. Oops. But cutting the CO2 off had an immediate effect of kind of decreasing the amount of algae. So I started looking for other things too to absorb the extra nutrients and maybe shade some of the mosses from the bright light. And that's when I met the nice folks over at Fish Tank Therapy, and they brought me over the frog bit. The frog bit sort of has a dual purpose. It absorbs nutrients and provides a little bit of shade, but it also shades this very back of the tank so that the blue color from that background that I made like really pops. It procreates pretty quickly too, so I've already had to pull some of it out, but it's so big it's a lot easier to deal with than duckweed and those other little things like that. Now with all that going on, I went ahead and I did some water tests and things were looking okay. That ammonia spike that you get when you add a soil substrate had subsided. So I grabbed some cycled biological material from another tank, I threw it behind the sponge, and I added 2 endlers. There was a male and a female, and of course within a day the female dropped a ton of babies. So now I've got 5 or 6 little baby endlers swimming around in here. Eventually the male was just chasing the female around too much, so I pulled him out. The female I left in because, man, she is going to town on this algae. She is just grazing on all this stuff. You can see her going from plant to plant and to each of these trees and picking at it, which is really cool. Also did get a bit of a bout of that diatom algae that I spoke of, so I added some Otocinclus in here. The other really cool thing that I've added are these yellow shrimp, and they're just like the cherry red shrimp, but they're this bright yellow color, and I've intentionally kept any cherry red shrimp out of this tank. I'm hoping that they'll breed. I started off with about 8. I've only found 1 that's died, so I've got 5 to 7 of them in here. I've only ever been able to count 5 at one time, but they can literally go up into the top of these branches and trees, and they're really hard to see up there. Even though it's starting to calm down and not coming back so quickly after I would clean the tank, I knew I still needed another superstar in the algae eating category, and I went with Amano Shrimp. I've kept Amano Shrimp for years, and many of them are ones that I've had since I started this hobby. The Amano Shrimp that I have in my 55 are enormous, and many of them are the ones that came out of the 30-gallon downstairs, which is the first planted tank I ever set up. So when I broke that down, I brought all the cherry shrimp that I could catch out of there and the Amano Shrimp, and I put them up here in the 55. They're doing great. But my local pet store hasn't had them for a while. I'm not sure what's going on there, but I reached out to my good buddy Rachel O'Leary at MissJinxed.com, and I ordered some Amano Shrimp from her. I gotta say I resisted a lot at first because I've got a good fish store and I don't have to mail order a lot of things. But more and more when I want something, I always check her stock list or send her a message. And man, she's so responsive and professional. She sent that stuff out right away. It came really well packaged. Everybody was doing great. Everything she sends is really well packaged. She does just a great job at shipping. She does it all the time, guys. She's a pro. I'm sure a lot of other people do a good job too, but I don't know them the way I know her. And I know when she mails me something, it's gonna arrive, and she'll do a good job getting it to me. And because she's my good buddy, she threw in a nice piece of Buse for those things to hold on to. When you mail shrimp, they don't like to be on plastic. There's actually a scientific name for animals that need to like grasp onto things to keep from being stressed out. And I can't recall what that is, but that is a scientific term. So H20 Plants sent me this really cool collection of mosses. I was super depressed that that snot slime algae had gotten all over it. And I was just hoping that those Amano shrimp really like to eat it. It paid off. Between the yellow shrimp, which seemed to be feeding off of it, but really not really making a difference, and the Odos taking care of the regular kind of algae that builds up in here, the brown algae, the Amano shrimp immediately went to town, and within a couple of days I was starting to see the moss again. The tricky thing with that snot stuff is I could pull it off. It comes off pretty easily, but if you're not careful, you'll pull off as much moss as you do that slime algae. So I really needed their careful little particular hands to reach in there and really pull it out from everything. That stuff had even gotten all over the bottom parts too, and it was really bumming me out because to clean it out, I kept pulling up, especially the 4-leaf clover and stuff, and I would accidentally uproot it, and then I'd have to try to plant it again. So yeah, the Amano shrimp really did a great job of cleaning up this tank and kind of helping me battle that algae. I've still had to clean it a little bit, but it's not coming back. After things started to calm down, I went back and recalibrated my CO2, and now I've got it in a really consistent manner. It's basically doing like a little under 1 bubble a second, maybe a bubble every second and a half or second and a quarter or something like that. And now that I have my little CO2 guide to kind of give me a rough idea how it's doing day to day, and it stayed in the green, everything seems fine. The substrate, the Seachem substrate that I used here has done really well. These plants love it. They're starting to run all over the place. I've never had 4-leaf clover grow quite as well as I have it growing now. Of course, I'm giving it every single advantage. I mean, CO2, very bright light, really nice premium substrate. It loves it, and everything's growing really well. Monte Carlo, which doesn't need all these things to grow well, of course, is also doing pretty well, and it's starting to send out runners all over the place. I'd say within a month or a few weeks, this whole area will be covered. Also added another little plant that I got out of the Kerrigan Spec. Can't quite remember the name of it now, but if I do, I'll put it here. And it's starting to really run all over. It's growing a lot better than I've seen it ever grow before, so that's cool. Most of the moss has started to come back. Not only can I see it, but I can see it starting to grow. I see new growth on just about all of them, and it's neat because I've got a lot of different varieties, so it looks really different from tree to tree. And it's pretty neat, but not so different that they stand out. There were a few mosses that just didn't make it, and I've got a couple of branches that are sort of bare. But what I want to do is when I feel like I've got a little ways to go, I'm not quite out of the woods yet as far as the algae goes, but it's really close. So as soon as that's gone away and I feel really comfortable about the state that the tank's in, I'm going to start adding Buse to these branches that were kind of empty. And that'll give me a whole different kind of texture and stuff, and hopefully look really neat. Buse is another plant that's sold as, low to medium light and doesn't need CO2, but I've been growing it that way. Now I bought those plants from buseplant.com near the beginning of the year, and I put them in a tank environment where it's got kind of low to medium light and no CO2, and they have not grown at all. I mean, they haven't died, but they haven't really grown. Like I was hoping to see a bit of growth off these things. So now I think it is a good idea probably to add CO2 and bright light to some Buse and just see what happens. I've got a little tester piece here in the top. And like I said, as the algae calms down, I'm going to add more and more to different branches and little holes and stuff in this tank. When I first started this tank, I got a lot of comments about the wood and stuff that I use. A lot of people are like, oh, it rots away and it looks terrible. I was like, well, but I think it's actually doing really well. I mean, I know it's way early, and years from now. So this tank might last like a year, 2 years, 3 years. I'm not sure how long it'll go before that wood eventually rots away and stuff. But even if they're just stumps in here, I think it's going to look really neat. What's cool about this wood too is it's got all these little pits and holes and stuff, and I've already seen the shrimp kind of climbing in and out. I recently saw an interview that Dustin's Fish Tanks did with, I think it's LR Brits, and he described this method that he has of basically doing this pile of rocks, and the shrimp kind of go into the rocks and they breed and stuff in there, and it kind of gives them a nice place to like drop their eggs without a whole bunch of predators around, and makes them feel really comfortable. So they kind of grow into this kind of network of cracks and crevices, drop their eggs or molt or do whatever they're going to do, and it gives them a nice safe space. This would, I think, potentially act in a very similar way. Definitely, some of these shrimp are a little big to kind of go inside of here, but definitely if they ever procreated, baby shrimp for sure could go all through these things, and I think that that would be really neat to see them just kind of coming out of these trees. What I will most likely do is move these, once these offspring are a little bit bigger, I'm going to move them out of here and into another tank. And what I think I'm going to do, I've got my 12-gallon that I had downstairs. It's got all the dwarf sage in it. I'm going to pull the ember tetras out of that tank, and I'm going to add them in here. And I think that that's going to be sort of the primary fish that's in this tank. I may end up getting a couple of more different kinds of shrimp or something like that. I'm going to have to see what's compatible and what would work out in here. A couple of other things I wanted to mention, I kind of forgot to do when I shot the main video. This plastic top that I picked, it does warp, but what I've found is that every few days, like every 5 or 6 days, I just kind of dry it off and I flip it around upside down and it goes just fine. And it's never dipped so low that it's caused a real problem or anything. And it still works great for like letting the light pass through, but also keeping the evaporation to a minimum. So I haven't been completely unhappy with this, although I probably will replace that piece with glass. The other thing I kind of forgot to show, and this isn't something I would typically do, but these LEDs in the background do change color, so if I wanted to go into party mode, I definitely could. I like this one that kind of fades gently from one color to the next. It just kind of adds like a really unique way to look at that. It's pretty cool. And I like to kind of, what's amazing is it looks like the blue lights are on in the background when I normally have it, but that's just the white lights. They just happen to look really, really blue. So that's the regular white lights like I usually keep it. And that's what I like the best, so I keep it there. Although I kind of like the green too. I'd be interested to know what you guys think in the comments about your favorite color of the background. This purple's kind of neat too in its own way, especially at night. It looks really, really neat. It's starting to get cold. It's not real cold, like it's gotten warm again the past couple of weeks, but it's getting to that point where I need to start thinking about taking the aquariums indoors. Because there's been a delay on the big tank, I'm not going to be able to put some of those fish where I originally intended. I think perhaps the bigger fish I may put in the 56 gallon, sort of in a temporary time. There's really only 2 fish that are fairly large that I have to put in there, but there are a couple of other fish that I'm going to have to figure out a way to deal with. When I get the big tank, all the big fish that are in the 56 gallon will immediately go down to there, and the 56 gallon will become like a larger tank for smaller fish. And I'm going to start stocking that with some other fish that maybe I want to breed, or just other things to try. Or maybe a giant 56 gallon shrimp tank, that would be kind of neat too. Definitely a lot of lessons learned with this tank. You know, monitor that CO2 when you first set it up. You gotta go remember to go back and check, or you could just end up gassing the whole tank. When I added my biological material, I also added a bottle of Activate, which I think really made a big difference as far as like getting that cycle really going well. Things like that don't actually cycle your tank. Maybe for a day or two they cycle it, but they definitely help get the process going. Alright, so my project this weekend is to break the stuff down in the garage and start bringing it inside. So that's the cube. I'm going to move some other tanks around, like the 12 gallon. Might break down the 10 gallon tank, I'm not sure. I just found out not too long ago that there's a club in town and they do these swap meets and stuff. So I've been taking some of my extra supplies and things down there and swapping them out for other things that I want. That's been really fun. I don't know if it's worth doing a video about, but maybe I'll mix that in too. But a lot of tanks are moving around. More than likely, that'll be next week's video. But until then, follow your bliss, keep a clean tank, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye. near the beginning of the first planted tank that I started. So I added some cycled material. So if any of you have